Now streaming live on YouTube.
Oh, we're live?
Yes, hello. Those of you listening in.
Okay, we are definitely live. Welcome everyone to the first of the Meet the Artist series through the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron Project. My name is Rosemary Oakman. I am the founder and director of the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron Project. This February, we will be coming up on our 8th year anniversary, and we have a lot of exciting things planned for this year. So before we dive into Becca's talk, we will have another artist talk with Maria Bentley on Tuesday, January 12th. And then on February 8th, we are going to have a series of artists speak in a panel called Looking Back and Moving Forward, 8 Years of the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron Project. But just to give you a little bit of background on the program, it started at Alfred University. That is where I met Becca Flis. And the program has evolved over time. We are a cross-generational community arts program. We focus on raising awareness about Alzheimer's disease, as well as elevating the arts and community through events, programming, and workshops. And to give a little bit of intro to Becca Flis, she is an absolutely incredible artist. I was the co-foundry directors of the Foundry Guild with her. We used to pour a lot of cast metal together. And Becca has been an all-star with the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron Project, pouring iron with us in Alfred, New York, Cornell, New York, as well as the Salem Artworks, as well as Hephaestus events in Beacon, New York. And something else that's just really phenomenal about Becca is she has been involved in advocacy events, as well as the installation and de-installation of Alzheimer's Glass and Iron exhibitions. So she's an all-around incredible Alzheimer's Glass and Iron artist. So thank you so much for speaking and sharing about your practice today, Becca.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. So I'm going to jump right in. Also, I am quarantined right now, so excuse the background. I'm stuck in my room. I work as a school teacher, so just part of the job this year. Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen. And Rose, will you just let me know when it's full screen, like you can see it on your screen?
We can see you, Becca.
Great, perfect. So a little bit of background about me from the artistic perspective, I guess. I went to actually the school I'm teaching at right now, Guilderland High School, and I always was obsessed with art. And these are some of the paintings and drawings that I did at Guilderland. And I always had this like ability to make things and render things like 3D in the drawings, but I always struggled with perspective and drawing things out to begin with. So like I can do like 2D stuff, but I primarily work in sculpture now. And the reason for that is because in freshman year, I had this epiphany. So in our freshman foundations class, which I'm sure Rose remembers, we were exposed to many different kinds of art. We did a little bit of 3D, a little bit of ceramic type sculpture stuff. And the first sculpture assignment we had was to make a 3D body extension using cardboard and Sobo brand glue. And it was the first time that I realized why I was drawn to sculpture, because we had to make these proposals and write out like almost like a fashion design type thing where you like sketched out your design on your body. And I had such a hard time sketching it out. It looked wrong. The proportions were off. The perspective was off. And then when I went to make it, I was just like, wow, it makes sense. I can see it in my head and I can make it. And it looks exactly like it does in my head. I just had this propensity for spatial relationships. And then it made so much sense why I had such an easy time creating 3D objects in 2D work, but then drawing it out for the perspective and everything was so difficult. It's just the way I think. I was born to be a sculptor, I guess. So moving on, I met Rose in, what did we meet? The casting class?
Yep, the National Casting Centers. Foundry class.
Great. Oh, that class was amazing. That was the first time that I was exposed to cast metal. And Rose started this amazing program, and she was working with older people with who had memory loss with either dementia or Alzheimer's. And she brought back all these really beautiful drawings and paintings, and using some iron oxides and they looked abstract, even though I'm sure the people making them might not have um, intended them as this abstract artwork, but they were really inspiring to create artwork from. So I saw this was the one I was assigned to as part of the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron project. And I think you said it was titled Fire Flower is what the person was like, oh, it's a fire flower. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. So I took that quite literally, and I created this this sculpture to the right here with this flame and this flower sort of intermixing in like a helix type form. And we were able to cast that in iron, and came out really well, surprisingly. Knowing what I know about casting now, it's kind of a miracle that it cast in one piece.
And I will interject and say that when we were getting started with the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron project, me and Becca were both budding metal artists, and Becca was so passionate about working through the process to really learn everything that there was to know about cast metal arts. And it was incredible just working alongside someone so passionate and interested in the same medium. So I think that was a really special moment when we were working on the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron project, just as these young artists. And Becca's fire flower that she made in response is absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. It was fun to make as well. It was sort of the jumping off point of learning and sort of taking what I have learned about something and morphing it into something else, which I'll talk about in a minute here. But Alfred, like casting center of the National Casting Center of Glass and Metal. So really, these are some photos from Alfred. We have this huge furnace, and there's something about iron casting that is so unlike any other casting. With bronze or aluminum or lower temperature metals, you can melt them in a gas furnace. So you can use propane gas, like heated, to melt it. But with iron, it melts at such a high temperature that you actually need these coke-fired furnaces, which coke is a type of refined coal that burns way hotter than coal, and it can actually melt iron. And so I think like the theatrics is what really drew me at first to cast iron, because with a bronze or aluminum pour, it was very calm, mellow, nothing exciting happened when you poured it in the mold. It was kind of, you knew what to expect. But with iron, there was so much that was the unknown. It's such a reactive metal. Even just getting it out of the furnace here, where if there's any sort of moisture, it just like sputters and sparks. And then at the end, you have this incredible transformation from, okay, you start when it's light out, and then you go until the wee hours of the night, and it's almost like a performance in and of itself. So it was quite an incredible process to be involved in at Alfred, or be exposed to, I guess. And these are some, not at Alfred, but these are some videos that sort of show what you can do with iron casting. So this one on the left here is a performance that was at the 8th International in Scranton. So they cast these like iron balls, and then when they were still red hot, they were sort of going off the Hungry Hungry Hippos performance. So just the way that they were able to like perform and make this like performative use of these cast objects while they were still red hot was just really fun, and brought sort of joy to everyone's face at the conference. Watching these hippos eat these red hot balls of cast iron, pretty exciting. And then the second video is when we were in Latvia, and just seeing the way that the metal pours into the molds is just incredible. We had this like bagpipe thing. It was almost like magical, the way that this was happening. And Latvia is really, after Latvia, I realized like this is something I want to continue to do, even if it's not the main part of my job. I think there's something so exciting about this whole process. And it really takes videos. It really takes a community. So this is at Alfred. This is like, it's a generous sized iron pour, but you can't really do it with one or two or three people. It needs to be a group. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think that's another reason why I gravitate towards casting, because it is something that is, for iron casting, it's such a niche little thing. So there are people from all across the world that you just like know. You're like, oh, I've heard of this person and that person and this country and that country. But it really is like a community event in and of itself. There's also this performative aspect of like opening the mold. It's kind of like Christmas or your birthday, where you're like, I wonder what's inside. I wonder if it cast perfectly. And then you like, this actually, Lauren Koch like captured this moment of me like being so excited that this actually cast, because it was one of the thinnest things I've ever cast, and there were no miscasts or anything. But just the whole process of mold making is something that has always struck me. And these are some of the things that I made during my final year at Alfred. It was a show completely of cast iron. And I was very drawn to these like branch structures and these organic shapes, and going on long nature walks and looking at all of these mushrooms and this life that grows on these dead things, and sort of this cyclical process of decay and new life. So this is actually 3.5 feet tall. This is the largest thing I've ever cast. I love it. It's still at Alfred. It's on loan there. This is a piece of palm tree bark, actually, that we got in Miami when we helped Coral with her workshop, her iron pour workshop. And this, again, is just some photos from Latvia. I actually did an impromptu dung mold workshop in Latvia. So dung molds are like cow dung mixed with clay and grog, which is a type of like hardened fired clay, and you can create molds. They're like ancient molds. So this is us getting the molds out, and again, this cycle of teaching and performance is really a thread throughout my life, I think. Speaking of teaching, every summer since 2013, I've been teaching sculpture at Bucks Rock, wearing my Bucks Rock sweater right now. Bucks Rock is another thing that I think has shaped me as an artist. It's a place that is an artist summer camp, but really I view it as like an artist like residency program. The students or the campers students, there are incredible, they're inspirational, and it has any type of art making that you can possibly think of there. They have like puppetry and glass blowing and sculpture and painting and batik and culinary, and they even have small metals, which I gravitated towards my first few summers at working there. And I actually was able to delve into silver casting while I was there. And I kind of view this artwork as a pivotal point for like things I worked on even in my thesis. There are a lot of dead bugs around, and I would collect them and want to cast them into silver, because that was the thing to do. But I collected this dead bee and I put it in a container, and then I like found a couple days later this other dead bee and put it in the container. And then, a couple weeks went by, and then I pulled them out of the container to get them ready for the silver casting. And they actually, the second bee, I guess, was not dead fully when I put it in there. So it had kind of like wrapped itself around the first bee that was already dead. And it was sort of this poignant moment of like, I felt so bad that I sort of stole the last moments of life of this bee, but I didn't know, I thought it was dead. And it had almost like embracing this other bee for comfort in its final moments in this tiny little container. So at that point I was like, well, I can't really cast them separately. They have to be together now forever. So I was able to do a burnout and cast them in silver together. But I think this moment of like solidifying that half second in time, that ephemeral moment in time, is something that I really took with me. Moving on to grad school, we didn't have iron casting at grad school. So me and another grad student, Matt Crane, were like, well, let's just organize our own iron pour. And so that's what we did. And we taught actually a bunch of the other grad students and undergrads with the like how to cast, how to make molds. We drove all the way up to Tonawanda Coke and picked up some coke, which again is that fuel that we would use for the furnace. Matt had a furnace that we used to cast. And it was an incredible experience bringing cast iron to SUNY Albany, even if it didn't stay there for that time that we were both there. It was incredible being able to share this experience, this community experience with our community. So I was taking these body casts from myself and trying to, they appeared as islands to me. So I first laid them out, and it didn't really feel like they were islands because they were just in this space that kind of felt like they were part of the architecture. But these are some close-ups of what they looked like, some different weird aspects. We called this one the ham bone. This right here, if you can see my cursor, because it's a thigh. Little joke. But I realized after displaying them without anything around it, they really needed this this like edge to really read as islands. So I was able to fabricate this sort of perimeter and then fill it with these fleshy colored stones to try and make them read more like these flesh islands, which sounds kind of creepy out loud. Then my second year at SUNY Albany, I had a really bad mono. I went to Poland for a week on winter break. And I came back, and I think the last day I was there, I had a really terrible headache in Poland. And I just was like, I can't wait to get home. I can't wait to get home. And then I got home a couple days before the second semester started. And I was like, wow, I have no energy. I think I have the flu. And I went on for missed the first 2 weeks of the second semester. And I was like, it's not going away. I'm exhausted. So it turns out I had mono. And I was like, well, I've been casting bronze and iron and aluminum at school. And what else can I cast with that is not that? Because I did not have the stamina for metal casting. And I had to have only a couple months to make my work before April, which is when we were installing at the end of April. So I was kind of reminded, Rose did this sugar boiling, and and she would pour out slabs of sugar and then pour iron over it. And she would use all these crazy dyes, and it was a really performative thing. So I was kind of remembering that. And then also over the summer at Bucks Rock, someone had made a fake sugar bottle to snatch over someone's head in theater. And so I'd already made these molds of these bottles because I don't know, in grad school, I just made molds of everything. So I was like, I love molds. They're so fun. Let me just use all the molds. And so I did a test at home with these sugar. I looked up how to make sugar bottles, and I did a test. And then I went to the movies or out with my friends or something. I came back a couple hours later, and I walked in, and my dad was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Look what happened. And I was kind of confused because I was like, why are you sorry? They're gorgeous. But then I realized for a normal person, you would come back to something unexpected and be like, oh no, it's not how I planned. But I've sort of learned to embrace that in my practice of things not really turning out how you plan, and then maybe utilizing that to your advantage because the results are even more beautiful and unexpected than the things that you planned. And I only had my microwave to take photos of these in at home. But I think the way, this is over a course of 2 hours after they had already started sort of devolving. And I think the way that these bottles curled in on themselves, they really had this evocative, gestural feeling of almost like bodies curling in sadness on themselves. And that sort of fit with this idea of preservation and decay, and that I was dealing with my cast iron objects, which were my body, but they were cast, but they also looked like these blackened pieces that were separated. So I don't know, that I had this connection in my head that I was like, I'm gonna run with this. Okay. And so I did. So I had seven, I think, different molds of different bottles that I viewed as very pristine and beautiful, almost like church windows. Some of them looked like that. And then I set up an installation and took probably like 1,000 photographs over the course of 3 days. So this was after like 1 minute of setting up. This was after like 2 hours of setting up. And this was after 2 days of setting it up. So you can see they like really almost melt back into the puddles of themselves. And if I had left it for 2 weeks or 2 months, all of them would be puddles. And it's interesting when you were looking at this that like if you were in person, you would be able to smell the sugar, especially if it was very humid, which is another thing that was really interesting. Having more than just the sense of sight, but actually like being able to smell the artwork is something that was sort of another happy accident that I played to my advantage. So when we set up in April in the university museum for the thesis show, I sort of made a few bottles that would melt faster than others. So it would have this smell early on. So I found a way to control this at first happenstance, this thing that happened like accidentally. And I'm like, you know, I'm going to find a way to make it do that because I like the result. Just a close up of those crazy bottles. And I didn't color it at all. Like that's just the color of the sugar. So that's just like, if I kept going and kept heating it past like the 300 degrees, like it would turn into caramel. And you know how caramel is that like caramely color? Well, these were orange. It's sort of the precursor to that. And this is funny because my first semester in the halfway point, we had a review. And I really like, I had something else going on. I already had work that like was ready to review, but I had this idea of casting in lard at this like praying hands. And I'm like, I don't know. I always had like that image in my head and I wanted to try and do it. But the night before the review, I put the lard in an alginate mold, which is like algae and water that you mix up to take like a cast of your hands. And I put it in the freezer. And then when I came back the next morning, it was the alginate was frozen because duh, water freezes when it's in the freezer. So I wasn't able to show that for my review, but then I still kept it sitting on my my table, my studio table. And over a couple of days after I was able to get the alginate off when it had defrosted, it began to break apart. And I'm like, you know, that was unexpected, but also interesting. And so I took a photo of it and then cleaned it up and threw it away. And I didn't think about it until like the last month before my my thesis show. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing, but they're not going to be praying hands. They're just going to be separated in this point of like a moment in time. So like, are they being raised in victory? Are they like the moment before a clap? Who knows? It's sort of this moment before moment. And this purple color was also an unexpected thing because the mold that I took from the hands, I like cast my hands and then like did a wax casting, and then I did a rubber mold around the wax, and that the wax was kind of like purple and it leached into the rubber. So when I poured the white lard into it and then did this whole freezing thawing process, some of that purple transferred to the lard hands and actually created this color, which this is just a photograph of the lard hand. That's not my real hand. But it made this like really surreal thing because when it broke apart, it was still white inside. So that was something that I still haven't figured out how to recreate, but I will because I want to show this again. And then I also was dealing with a lot of, at this point, food art. And so I recreated this loaf of bread, which is bread is sort of the fulfilling base food for a lot of like cultures. And also that if you think of like the most basic food is bread, but then this bread is just flour and salt, which is like not nutritious and actually toxic. So just that weird dichotomy. And then I went through this series of casting food. I'm like, okay, well, let me cast things I like to eat. Some cast pierogi. After I went to Poland, I was really inspired for that. Just cast cookies. So this was displayed with my grandmother's cooking pad here. Sort of nostalgic for me because I would always bake with my family. So that was a way that we would connect with each other. So casting this as like a solid object almost gives it a different meaning than if I just had these separate cast iron cookies on a regular baking sheet. So just in my mind, gives things a different perspective when you see it in cast iron. The same thing here. Casting, I really wanted to cast these roses just to see if I could, because it's very challenging having this large, thick bulk of iron and then having this really thin, fragile stem. And they did end up breaking. I never got a perfect cast, but it almost works. I think it almost works that they're broken, because it shows that you can have this fragility mixed in with this strength, and they're still beautiful even though they're broken. I don't know, that's still figuring that one out. And then, you know, that was, I cast this one, like, I want to say sometime in 2019. Then a bunch of, you know, stuff happened and we were in quarantine. And I was like, okay, obviously can't do casting. Couple weeks before quarantine, my friend was teaching a watercolor class, and I'm like, oh, I'll come. I want to learn how to do watercolor again. Both my grandmother and my aunt, who live in Alaska, were really big watercolor painters, and I tried one class and I hated it. So then with my friend, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll, you know, come to this class. So I created this flower image with her, and then on this one, I had a garden going in the summer, and I didn't really leave my house, even though I usually have my summer job at Bucks Rock, but I was just painting things that I saw and developing my watercolor ability. I did a few commissions. I did, you know, things that I could see. I did some more self-portraits, got back into charcoal and mixed that with the watercolor. I tried out acrylic paint again. I hadn't painted an acrylic paint since high school, so that was definitely something. I started a series of self-portraits in isolation. So I have all these crazy like selfies that I took because I went a little crazy in the quarantine. But then I started thinking, you know, all of this like uproar started happening. The pandemic really started. And so I also was thinking about like how the four horsemen of death are like, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are represented. And so this is pestilence, the white horse, the red horse of war. And it's oftentimes seen as like civil war. So having this flag split, I think shows that. The black horse of death. So intermixing this idea of like the lack of flour and the shelves, and the fact that flour is such a base ingredient to make bread, which is sort of the base food that a lot of people think of. If you think of the most basic form of food, it's like bread and pasta, and there was no bread or anything on there. So having this like emaciated bag of flour as famine, basically. And then this is the pale horse. And I just see this as like, I don't know, the direction we're going in if we don't deal with global warming, which maybe is a little bit morbid, but I don't know. We're seeing some crazy effects of that now. Yeah. And then I was able to actually cast iron during July, and it was at the Rivers of Steel in Pittsburgh. They were the only place that was casting, because all the other places that usually do casting are universities, and they were all closed. So this was just a site, like they're not affiliated with the university. So I was able to go there, and everyone was really safe. We were all like, the tables were like 12 feet apart, and everyone was wearing masks anyways, because when you're making sand molds, like, you don't want to get silicosis. But then casting these was really incredible there. And this was actually an accident. I didn't vent the mold properly, and it created these pockets and these beads of iron. But instead of being mad, I was like, wait, this kind of looks like it has the virus on it. And so like in the future, if I make more of these, I will then be trying to recreate that same effect, because I think it's kind of ominous and creepy that happened. But I cast a bunch of safety gear, thinking about how going into like the parking lot of anywhere, you see all these used masks and used gloves just strewn on the ground. And it's like, what if 150 years from now they were excavating the earth down to this level of 2020, what would they find? What would be like the most representative of this time as a fossil? And I think all of this used garbage that will probably never decay that we're just throwing into landfills. So solidifying those in time, almost like these relics. And so I titled this Relics of the Year 2020. So I don't know, pretty depressing. A lot of heavy stuff going on in the world. To combat that, I've been making a bunch of stickers. So I bought an iPad during the quarantine to like practice drawing and get my hand into digital art. And I had a friend from Bucks Rock who was like, you should totally do it. It'll really help with the drawing practice because you can easily like erase things. And it was actually great. I was able to make a bunch of different like weird designs. And then I bought a Cricut machine, which like you can use to cut out different things. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make stickers because stickers make people happy. And so I started sending stickers to my friends. And my friends were like, you should sell these. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I did, and people were like buying them actually, which was really exciting. So I'm like, okay, I can make some people like happy by selling them my stickers because everyone loves stickers. I don't care how old you are. Stickers are really the thing. So I started making stickers, and I started making some weird stickers like this, the moon is real. And do you want a side salad with that? I don't know, just a bunch of stuff. I also did a lot of crocheting, and especially getting into the winter months, practicing that. I'm the type of person that like takes all my experiences and just does a little bit of everything, almost like a Becca of all trades. These were some other things that I had cast before the pandemic. And if you're interested in any of the products that I have, you can go to Flis Fine Art on Facebook and to my photos and for sale album to see what I have for sale. You can follow me on Instagram, though my shop right now is just on Facebook. And I also do commissions. So if you click the commissions folder, you can see sort of the past commissions that I have done. But that's it. That is what I've been up to. And I'm just really excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Becca. And I will let that stay up just for another second. So it's at Flis Fine Art on both Instagram and Facebook to find some of Becca's work. And then Becca, if you want to end the slideshow, we do have a couple of participants on YouTube. If they have any questions, they can ask away. And then we also have some questions just prepared about your studio practice.
Yeah, definitely. Hit me.
All right. Well, I think one of the questions I had for you is what drew you to cast iron art?
Well, in the beginning, actually, I took like a welding, or I took like the sculpture class at Alfred. I think it was with Julie Ward, and we had to do like a welding project, and that was like the first time I'd ever really touched metal as like an art form, and that was really exciting. And I was like, I want to do more of this. Like, what can I do next year that's like a class like this? And Julie was like, well, I'll take the casting class. And so I took the casting class, and then, we did some bronze and aluminum, and I was like, yeah, this is great. But then Salem Artworks, when we went to Salem Artworks and I saw the way that iron reacted when it hits moisture, I was like, I have to do this. It was like, boom, because it had poured. It was like torrential downpouring. It was kind of dangerous, in retrospect. Just like because it was raining, but they dealt with it so safely, and like everyone, I don't think anyone got hurt, even though it was like raining. They were just trying to get the metal poured, but I don't know, it was like everyone like worked together to like get it done and get it done safely, and it was such a great learning experience at Salem Artworks. I'm like, I have to do this. Like, this is incredible, and you can force iron to do that with reaction molds in a safe way. So, yeah.
I completely agree. For anyone who hasn't seen iron poured, it is an absolutely magical experience. And I think too, getting up really close to the iron, right after you pour an open face mold, you can see the magnetic field still moving. It looks like the iron's almost dancing on the top. And for me, I think that was one of those things that once you see that type of energy, you're like a moth to a flame with it.
Yeah. And you don't really get it that often with bronze. And then even if you do, it's not the same texture consistency. So for sure.
And definitely there's that community there of just everyone working together and collaboratively on individual artworks. So I think that was something I was definitely echoing you, super drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
How, Becca, do you see your sculptural practice evolving once once you're able to get out of quarantine?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Or social distancing. Not that we'll go back to normal, but once we're able to safely gather again, how do you see your sculptural practice evolving at that point?
Well, I think up until this point, I have been like just casting like different objects in iron to see how that changes like my reaction to them. And I think moving forward, I have this like new idea. I've been thinking a lot about memory, and I've been thinking a lot about something that a professor at Alfred had said to me when I was a freshman. Like every time you save a JPEG image, it corrupts it again. And so like if you save a JPEG image like 40 times, it's going to be eventually like corrupt. And I think like that has been hitting me a lot lately, especially because I've been so like crazy with my memory because it's such a hectic time teaching. So I kind of want to make a reaction piece to that where I make like some casts and molds and like do this like progression of cast mold, cast mold, cast mold, cast mold, to see like, okay, here's casting 1 and here's casting 100, and how like that degrades over time, almost as like a representation of this like memory degrading over time. I don't know, a lot of my work deals with decay and preservation. I don't know. So I think instead of picking certain objects, I think I should, or I think I want to make some, sculpt some objects and not just like cast objects from real life. It'll also be a challenge for me.
That sounds really interesting. What mediums are you thinking of casting in?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I could complete that project very quickly with cast iron, since like you couldn't cast both of them at the same time, obviously. So I think maybe something like soap, because you can get like melt and pour soap, or like candle wax, and then maybe I could burn them all afterwards. I don't know. Something that solidifies quickly, so I won't have to necessarily spend 5 years on this.
And then the next question I have for you is something I think a lot of artists can relate to during this time. But if you're feeling stuck or uncreative, what inspires you?
Oh, what inspires me? I like peruse Instagram and like Tumblr a lot. I look at really cute dog pictures to make myself feel better. I follow a blog on Tumblr called Daily Frogs, and there's a different frog picture every day. And it's just something that makes me smile. And then sometimes I'll like draw them, or sometimes I'll just like, okay, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure, especially like I feel a lot of pressure on my weekends when I'm not like working. I'm like, yeah, I gotta make art. But then I'm like, oh, I'm just so tired, or like I don't know what to do. So I'll just start like doodling or something. And like today, after work, I was like, oh, like, okay, gotta like do something artistic. I just started like playing around with oil pastels, like without anything in mind of what to make. I'm like, I just want to practice blending them. And then I ended up drawing a hand. Like, so like, I don't know. I think being forgiving with yourself is really important during this time, but also just like, I don't know, don't have expectations. Just go into it and say, I'm just going to have fun like playing with this material, or I'm just going to have fun drawing this, daily frog image or something.
I think that's great. A really lighthearted approach, I think, can get everyone out of an uncreative bind.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And going for a walk.
Yes. Oh my goodness, so many walks over 2020.
Yeah. When I'm done quarantining, I'm going to go for a really long walk. Yeah.
So I'm curious, how do you see your artistic career unfolding? And I think that was a question that we had on the YouTube page as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I'm. It's a hard question that I deal with every day. I really like teaching. I really like teaching at Bucks Rock. I like the Montessori style that they have there, and I like helping the young artists with their creation and like bringing their idea into creation. And so that's very exciting for me. Um, right now, especially with the pandemic, it's just like so crazy. I feel like I can't judge this year teaching high school as like, oh, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Because it's so different than a normal year. So I'm not really, I don't think it's fair to like judge this year teaching to be like, I'm going to make a decision if I want to do this based on this insane experience. Although there are aspects of it that I do like. I like talking to the AP students about their work. I view myself as like a teacher of some sort. And I think that with teaching, you have to also like practice your own art. You can't like just be a teacher and not practice your own art, because then how are you growing as an artist to be able to then like help your students grow as artists? And I don't know. I think a lot of people maybe love teaching and don't necessarily work on their own art, and like that's fine for them, but I don't know. I can't give up both. I can't give up making my own art, but I also really enjoy teaching art. So I don't know. I got to find a job that does both of those things.
Definitely. What inspired you to go into teaching?
um, oh, I had this teacher at Guilderland who was so strange and called
Is
me.
that where you're teaching right now?
Yeah. He doesn't teach there anymore, unfortunately, but he would like, I just remember he would call me Binky because it was short for rabinculitis. He gave everyone weird names. And I was like, okay, I don't like being called Becky. And I was like, you can call me Becky, because why are you calling me Binky? Like, what are you doing? Look at like now I'm like that. It's so funny. But I was like, what? And he would like take this oar, like a paddle for like a boat, and like be in one of those wheelie office chairs and just like paddle around the room and just like sing like off key to the radio. Just like a very strange, eccentric person. Very good at art, like very like capable, and was able to like help you with technical things or conceptual things. But I think like him showing his like strange eccentric side really made me feel comfortable in the art room to like express myself and be myself and not be worried about being like that weird art kid, because like the teacher was weird, so like any weirdness that I showed was not gonna matter, because it's like, why are you rowing around the room like? And so he was so funny. And I think I wanted to become a teacher because of teachers like that. And I had, a lot of different teachers that sort of expressed their eccentricities in weird ways. But that's a very distinct memory. And I was like, I want to be like this guy. Like, this guy makes me feel comfortable. And this guy inspires me. And he knew his stuff. He knew about art. And he's incredible, even when he was just giving demonstrations. And so I think originally I was like, I want to be exactly like this teacher. And now I'm like, I respect this teacher, but I have to be my own person, because I can't be a copy of someone who already exists. So I take like some of him, and I'm like doing that now.
Pre-pandemic, were you rowing around the room?
No, although I do wheel around the room in my wheelie chair sometimes, like when there's like a few less students in the room, and I'm like, what are you doing over there? Like, Miss Flis, what? Yeah, it's good.
That is wonderful. And you answered my next question, who has been an important mentor in your artistic journey? Is there anyone else who has played a big role as a mentor for you?
Yeah, I think all the counselors at Bucks Rock that I've ever interacted with. So I can't like gush about Bucks Rock enough, honestly. It's basically like this huge artist community where like the people who are working there are teaching these younger artists who are ages 8 through 18. But everyone who's working there in like the art like role, they also have like theater and music and dance. They have like all types of art you can possibly imagine. But everyone I've interacted with, like, from the painting shop or from the culinary shop or from, the weaving shop or something, I've had some really great, like intense conversations about like artwork that I'm currently working on or artwork that we've seen at a museum or like favorite artists. And it just, I don't know, it just everyone I've ever interacted with there is so inspiring that I feel like it's that environment. And it's similar to like the environment when we were at Alfred. We're sort of living in the same area, seeing each other every day in the studio, working on your stuff. And you don't really have a lot of other things to do, like in Alfred, because nothing's really around. But at Bucks Rock, because it's a sleepaway camp, you're not like coming in every day from your house. So it's just like a community. And I think that's why I really like it. And it harkens back to like why I really like cast iron because of that community. Like everyone has at least something in common. We're all there working at Bucks Rock, or that we're all there working towards this goal of having a successful iron pour. And it's just incredible, like the conversations you can have with people you never would think that would have, like, okay, like this weaving artist and I have like a very similar outlook on life and on our artistic practice. And I don't know, it's great. It's unexpected.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, Becca.
Yeah.
I think that I am going to do a last call for anyone who's watching live. If they have any questions for Becca, please put those in the chat now. And while we wait for that, I'm going to do one more plug. I am a huge fan of Becca Flis's art, and I will testify I absolutely adore her stickers. I also have some of her cards, which are always beautiful. It's a grief card, but it's done absolutely beautifully. And I've worked with Becca to do some really important commissions this year. So I've gifted my mother, as well as one of my mother's friends, one of Becca's charcoal commissions, or two of Becca's charcoal commissions, one for each of them. And they turned out so lovely. So I think if you are looking for a special, maybe not holiday gift to be commissioned now, we're getting a little bit close. But especially birthdays, Valentine's Day, Becca is an absolutely incredible artist to work with. And we will link to her Facebook and Instagram through Alzheimer's Glass and Iron social media. And I do encourage you to look through for any last minute holiday shopping.
Thanks.
But I think I am looking at the YouTube now. I don't see any other questions. I know Becca has engagements after this, so I want to be respectful of her time. And I want to thank her so much for sharing about her artistic practice with us this evening, as well as her connection to the Alzheimer's Glass and Iron Project. I think as a community, we are so lucky to know you and have you as one of us, Becca.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.